Welcome to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Coming up, we'll review the week's top stories about the end of fall veto session, being the end of the state's Invest in Kids School Choice Scholarship Program, and the status of the state's gun ban registry rules. I'll then join the Center Square's Dan McCaleb to further discuss those stories and more. That's ahead with Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop.
Do you know what elected officials in Illinois are doing with your tax dollars? Do you want to make sure that your voice is heard? If so, then you need Blue Room Stream, a live and archived video streaming service that provides access to government meetings and events. With Blue Room Stream, you can watch how your elected officials make decisions, hold them accountable for their actions, and be a more informed citizen. Blue Room Stream is the perfect way to get involved in the democratic process and to make a difference in your community. Subscribe today at blueroomstream.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Here's some of the top stories from the past week. With the end of fall veto session, Illinois' Invest in Kids School Choice Scholarship Program benefiting around 9,600 students will come to a close, despite families for months lobbying to extend the privately funded program beyond the December 31st sunset. Legislators didn't advance any such measure before adjourning Thursday. Republicans were critical of Democrats they say caved to the teachers' unions who opposed the program. But before adjourning, Democratic State Representative Kevin Olickal said that he'll continue to fight.
There's no guarantee that they'll be able to stay at the school that they may have grown to love and build community within, and may be thrown into a harmful transition.
After the House adjourned, solidifying the program wouldn't be extended, House Minority Leader Tony McCombie said they'll come back next year to work at reauthorizing the program.
I think there is some things that we could do to make it a better program, a more effective program that could serve more students as well.
In other education action, the legislature advanced maps for elected Chicago public school districts after the House and Senate agreed on ethics provisions for a new elected school board. Legislators return January 16th. Whether the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules will bring a motion to suspend gun ban registry emergency rules for the Illinois State Police before the January 1st deadline to register is still up in the air. After Tuesday's J-Car hearing, Republican State Representative Ryan Spain said suspending the rules in their December meeting is an option.
I think, as I said, we have to assume that the law is constitutional until a court tells us it's not.
Democratic State Senator Bill Cunningham wouldn't speculate if J-Car would suspend the rules despite mounting questions and pending lawsuits, including possible review by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I called for a vote to issue a formal objection, which resulted in a tie during our October meeting.
After week 5 of the registry being open, of more than 2.4 million firearm owners' ID card holders, just 0.12%, or around 2,900 individuals, have disclosed a banned item. Those are the top stories from the past week from Illinois. Find more online at thecentersquare.com. Coming up for Illinois in Focus, I'll join the Center Square's Dan McCaleb. This is Illinois in Focus, a production of America's Talking Network. I'm Greg Bishop.
Do you want a front row seat to how Illinois government really works? Do you want to see how laws are made in real time? If so, you need Blue Room Stream, a live and archived video streaming service that provides access to government meetings and events. With Blue Room Stream, you can watch how your elected officials make decisions, so you can make informed decisions about your community and your future. Subscribe today at blueroomstream.com. Blue Room Stream, government transparency at your fingertips.
Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, Vice President of News and Content at the Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. Joining me again today is Greg Bishop, the Center Square's Illinois Capitol Bureau reporter and editor. How are you today, Greg?
Dan, I'm down in the catacombs of the Illinois State Capitol. We have office space down here whenever they're in session and just hanging out, monitoring everything that's going on here.
Well, we'll get into that shortly, Greg. We are recording this on Thursday, mid-afternoon, November 9th. And as we are recording, Greg, the state legislature is in the waning moments of its final legislative day of the year, also known as veto session. Greg, heading into today, there were several unresolved issues in the General Assembly that were either going to get resolved today or they were not going to get resolved today. Among them is the Invest in Kids School Choice school choice scholarship program, which allows private donors to donate money to a scholarship fund that is then given to lower income families to send their children to a private school of their choice. Invest in Kids is set to expire December 31st unless the legislature acts. Greg, is the legislature acting on this?
Considering that as we're recording this Thursday afternoon and the House adjourned for the year before we hit record here, literally half an hour or so before, they adjourned and no bill was brought forward. The Senate's still in session, but even if they were to bring something forward, the House is not here to field that bill. So the Invest in Kids School Choice Scholarship Program is going to sunset on December 31st.
What does that mean? It's like more than 10,000 kids are going to the school of their choice, the private school of their choice, this school year. Of course, the school calendar year begins in late August, early September, depending on your school district, and goes until late May, early June. So what's going to happen to these kids that are going to these private schools on the Invest in Kids program now that it's going to expire mid-school year?
Yeah, and I think 9,600 kids, but Dan, there are 10,000 plus, if not more, in families that are on waiting lists to try to tap into that privately funded school choice scholarship program that's been around for about 5 years now. And tens of thousands of families have benefited from it. These are families of lesser means that have been able to get in line and get qualified for the scholarship program. There's a lot of unanswered questions for some of the kids. Now, while some have said that you are going to see the scholarship money given out before December 31st, and that could carry some of the kids through the entirety of this current school year. But say there's a student that's in third grade and they're looking to go to the fourth grade in the same school of their choice. For the next school year, they are not going to be able to access those funds through the Invest in Kids School Choice Scholarship Program, meaning that the program is going to end, it's going to sunset, but there is possibly some action that could be taken when legislators return on January 16th, and we'll see what happens. But Republicans all week and the previous veto session week, they've been demanding that some bill be called while they wanted to see the program made permanent and even expanded. Because some of the various particulars about this program, it's a $100 million cap, and you've got 75% Illinois income tax credits that could be given to those donors who donate. They had a max of $1 million they could have donated, and a lot of money went into that program, but it didn't even reach that cap. But there were proposals to extend it for 5 years, to maybe have a tiered structure for the donations, maybe tier down some of the tax credits that are available. And again, these are private dollars. These are not tax dollars going into this program for the School Choice Invest in Kids program. So when you've got the questions of whether or not a third grader, a fourth grader, a fifth grader, a kid who just went into high school, whether or not they're going to be able to access those funds for the 2024-25 school year, that is at this point not going to happen because the Invest in Kids School Choice Scholarship Program is going to sunset. Now, whether or not they can get the political consensus to bring this up and reinstate the program when they return in mid-January or throughout the spring session, we'll see. But obviously, Republicans have been clamoring to have the bill extended, if not made permanent. You had scores of families that we've seen here on the grounds at the Capitol wearing their blue shirts, chanting "Save Our Scholarship," "Speaker, call the bill." That they want this scholarship. They say that they have benefited greatly from it. They've gotten a quality education. Some of the stories we've heard were children who may have been diagnosed on the autism spectrum, getting bullied at their public school and not wanting to even go to school, finding relief going to a private school that had more programs that were capable of getting them the education they needed. You have stories of kids in urban settings students that their public schools were failing them, and their families couldn't afford to take them to a private school, but they were able to be eligible for the Invest in Kids School Choice Scholarship Program. So they got those scholarships and they went and are excelling. These are countless stories that we've heard across the political spectrum, across the state, and a lot of concern now as to what their future is going to be in a state like Illinois, where the public school systems don't have the greatest record when it comes to adequacy targets for English, for math, for science. And you've got, higher costs per student for the public schools. While graduation rates may be increasing, you're seeing delinquency rates continuing to be a high threshold, and you're seeing adequacy targets not being met in the public system. But with the Public Teachers Union putting the pressure on Democrats in particular to end this program, they claim that it was not being properly tracked and whether or not children were excelling in school. They say that the stats weren't even available to assess whether or not the program was working well. So that was one criticism. Another criticism they said was it diverts public money away from public schools. But the supporters of that pushed back and said that's not the case. These are private dollars. And obviously the rates of satisfaction with the families that have been showing up here at the Capitol for the past 6 veto session days has been immense, and they've been pushing for this program to be extended. But now they're going to be having to find other options to try to get their children educated in a school of their choice.
We do our best to keep our own personal opinions out of Illinois in focus, but I got to say, this does break my heart, just knowing that these disadvantaged children from lower income homes face an uncertain future, might be forced to go back, likely will be forced to go back to their local public school that in many cases is failing them. They chose this program because their local school was not working for them, but now they're going to have to go back. So we'll see what happens with this particular program.
Well, and Dan, and one thing to note too is a lot of the stories that popped up later on in this conversation, including the Chicago Teachers Union president sending their child to a private school, and
because she can afford to. Let me just interrupt there. Because she is of means, she makes more than $150,000 annually, so she has the means, where these other families who are taking advantage of investing kids don't have the means. I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Well, and that's exactly the point is there's a lot of leaders in elected office who send their children to private schools because they have the means to do so. This program brought about some level of parity to where families of lesser means were able to send their children to a school of their choice, but now they no longer have that option.
And just to close on this particular topic of veto session, just want to repeat what you said. Teachers unions in Chicago Teachers Union and unions across the state were vehemently opposed to this. And of course, they do have influence both through their political donations and their phone calls, etc., over lawmakers. But what else, Greg? That's not the only issue remaining on the last day of legislative session this year. You had the moratorium on new nuclear plants in the state. What's going on there?
Yeah, so this was a bill that the governor actually vetoed over the summer, and it was a bipartisan bill to essentially remove the portion in state law that put a moratorium on new nuclear facilities being built. And while the bipartisan legislation passed in the spring, the governor vetoed it in the summer. He said that he wanted more of a focus on ensuring that it was only going to be for small modular reactors. Now, this is still a tested technology that's not mainstream quite yet, but the sponsors of the bill, they wanted to make sure that Illinois was out in front of this. For those who didn't know, Illinois has 6 large nuclear plants as is right now. I think we're one of the states with the most nuclear facilities for energy production. But with the policies that Governor Pritzker has put forth to bring about fewer coal-fired power plants by 2040 and 2045, and bringing about more wind and solar to be more green, as the Democrats say with their initiatives, there was concern and still is concern about energy reliability, especially for the 2 different energy grids that Illinois has. And even in the past few years, we've seen at least the MISO grid for the southern part of the state talk about the possibility of brownouts. And with the trajectory of ending coal-fired power plants by state policy by 2040 or 2045, there's significant concerns. So the sponsor of the bill, instead of trying to override the governor's veto, came back with new legislation, and they advanced that out of the Senate. And today, on Thursday, they advanced it out of the House. So that new measure that the sponsors say fits with what the governor's looking for, that is going to be sent to the governor's desk. Now, State Senator Sue Rezin, holding a news conference after the House passed her bill, she talked about the importance of getting this set up, because even trying to get a small nuclear modular nuclear reactor for energy, which are smaller footprints and don't necessarily require the large amount of high capacity lines to transmit it to various places. This will be a 7-year process or so to actually get the permits from the federal nuclear agency when it comes to oversight and fitting all the regulations. So getting this across the finish line and signed by the governor, they said, is going to be absolutely integral to ensuring that the grid reliability is there, especially if they do take coal-fired power plants more and more offline. So that was one veto that they ended up actually addressing during fall veto session. So we'll see how the governor reacts to that bill once it does get on his desk.
One other issue you've been following, is earlier this year, January of this year, the state legislature passed and Governor Pritzker enacted a ban on more than 170 types of semi-automatic weapons in the state. The ban went further than that. Of course, there were challenges in both state and federal courts. One judge issued an injunction preventing the state from enforcing the sales of those banned preventing the state from enforcing the sale of the banned weapons. There was like a 5 or a 6 day window where individual Illinois residents could go and buy those now banned weapons. The injunction was lifted, and state police now say that the weapons you bought, if you bought those weapons during the 5-day window, you still face penalties. You cannot register them with the state. The registry is part of the state law now. And Republicans were hoping to get a hold harmless provision passed during veto session. So those individuals who bought these now banned weapons during that period would not be penalized for it. Did that get through?
That did not. That was a measure from State Senator Jason Plummer. He had brought this forward shortly after the stay was issued on that preliminary injunction from the Southern District, and talked with him yesterday and just tried to get an update on if Democrats were going to be able to get on board with this. And he said they weren't. And with the House now out, obviously that is a measure that is not going to take effect or even be sent to the governor's desk for consideration. So come January 1st, those who have firearms that they purchased during that injunction window, or those who had firearms when they purchased them from a temporary restraining order in state court, because those were in place for months, impacting thousands of people. Those firearms were purchased after January 10th's enactment date of the gun ban, and state police say that they cannot be registered. So those individuals are going to be facing potential criminal charges if they're found out of compliance with a banned firearm, even though they were just following a court order who said that the law was enjoined from being enforced during that time window. So one quote that Senator Plummer said is, "Only in Illinois can you be a felon for exercising your constitutional rights." And that's a sentiment that we're hearing a lot from Republicans on this issue when it comes to all of the ongoing questions and concerns about a gun registry. So clearly that was a measure that just did not advance at all. We had no committee hearings about that bill. So Senator Plummer resigning himself to seeing that this is not something that's going to be viable. And obviously a lot of gun owners looking at that January 1st deadline, wondering what exactly they're going to do. And I know that we're going to talk about the gun ban registry hearings that have happened, but there are just stacking questions on top of each other as to how exactly this is going to be enforced, what needs to be registered, what state police or law enforcement are going to do for those who don't register. As we've been tracking each week, the registration totals have not really been coming into the amount that you would think for how many firearm owners ID card holders there are in the state.
Look, Greg, I was just saying, before you go further into that, because we only have a few minutes left, and I do want to talk about that, but let me just go back to veto session. Any other outstanding issues briefly that you want to discuss about today's final day of legislative session of the year?
Yeah, they, of course, one measure passed the Senate, and it was a bill that the governor vetoed about religious consideration for school lunches and what kinds of lunches would be served in hospitals, be it, for those of the Jewish or for the Muslim faith. That measure, they brought one forward. They said complied with what the governor did with his mandatory veto, and it passed the Senate. But that was not brought up in the House from my initial indication here as the House is wrapped up. Another measure that came out of the House that I'm not sure if the Senate's going to take up quite yet is a bill that allows for state House staffers to unionize. So that could be something brought up in early January. You have several other measures that have passed, including the Chicago Police Union getting a measure through to change their cost of living allocation to ensure that the date of birth is not impacting somebody's pension for Chicago police. That also was approved. Another Chicago-centric measure that really gets into the weeds deals with the elected school board that's going to be happening soon, but they had to get the maps in place. So we had on Wednesday the House pass a measure they said was had everybody on board, but then the Senate said that it didn't have the ethics provisions that they sought. So the House again on Thursday passed their measure. The Senate's still in session. It's possible they could bring that up before they adjourn today. But those are just a collection of a few of the other items that came up throughout legislative session here.
So want to get into this gun registry as part of the bill that was passed and signed by Governor Pritzker in January that bans more than 170 semi-automatic weapons and other things, accessories, etc. Those who pre-owned those weapons before the law went into effect in January are now required to register them with the state. There's all kinds of confusion about this registry, questions from gun owners, legal gun owners, I might add. Greg, the state police were required or asked to hire or to hold a series of public hearings. There were 3 of them, from the north part of the state to the central part of the state to the south part of the state. You covered all 3 of them. The last one was earlier this week. Just tell us what you heard and what's next.
Sure, yeah. And again, the questions. What needs to be registered? Is a pistol grip for an airsoft gun and assault weapon attachments? What about magazines that could take 30 AR-15 rounds, but would only take 10 rounds of a different caliber magazine? Is that an extended magazine? What if people don't register? How are they going to be enforced? These are all different types of questions that Illinoisans brought to Illinois State Police during these hearings. The first one in Springfield, very small committee room, almost full, but people were frustrated that they were given a deadline to register to speak in person, and that deadline was quick upon the first hearing. So a lot of people felt that they didn't get a chance to actually register their public comments to be able to speak publicly. The second hearing was in Chicago, wasn't very well turned out, but the third hearing was down in Caseyville in the Metro East St. Louis area. There were about 150 gun owners down there asking questions. What was frustrating for a lot of them in the Caseyville hearing, in a large venue, it was the Caseyville Community Center, there was no public address system. So the questions couldn't be heard and the answers from state police couldn't be heard, especially for those in the back of the room. So clearly, still a lot of questions left to be answered. Illinois State Police say that they're going to bring forward the answers before the next Joint Committee on Administrative Rules hearing, which is in December. JCAR could possibly suspend the rules, delaying that January 1st deadline, but no indication that's going to happen in December. But all of this, Dan, still being litigated this week. After last week on Friday, the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals 3-judge panel, but now one of the attorneys in that case has motioned for an en banc review, meaning they're looking for them to review this case instead of a 3-judge panel.
Well, thank you, Greg. Listeners can keep up with all of Greg's reporting at thecentersquare.com, but we are out of time. For Greg Bishop, I'm Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe. Thank you for listening.